When my sister stood up at my birthday dinner and announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby, I just smiled and took another bite of cake. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting 3 months for this exact moment. My name is Elena Martinez, I'm 31 years old, and I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting liars destroy themselves. Growing up with Jessica was like living in someone else's shadow. She was 4 years younger, but somehow always managed to be the center of attention. When I got straight A's, my parents would nod and say, "That's nice, Elena." When Jessica finger-painted a mess, they'd gush about her artistic talent. I'd save my allowance for months to buy something special, only to find it mysteriously appearing in Jessica's room the next week. "Why can't you just share with your little sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. The pattern was always the same. Jessica would see something I had, something I loved, and she'd find a way to take it. My favorite stuffed animal, my best friend in middle school, even my high school boyfriend. She'd turn on the charm, and suddenly it was hers. My parents never saw it as manipulation. To them, Jessica was just naturally magnetic, and I was being selfish for not wanting to share. College was my escape. I chose a university 3 states away, somewhere Jessica couldn't follow. For the first time in my life, I wasn't competing with my sister for attention. I blossomed. I made real friends who valued me for who I was, not as Jessica's older sister. And in my junior year, I met Marcus. Marcus Rivera was everything I'd dreamed of. Tall, dark hair, warm brown eyes, and this genuine smile that made me feel like the only person in the room. He was studying business while I was in communications, and we met in an economics class we were both dreading. He spilled coffee on my notes during our first conversation, and instead of being annoyed, I found his nervousness endearing. "I'm usually smoother than this," he said, his cheeks flushing red. "I hope you'll give me a chance to prove it." That coffee spill led to dinner, which led to breakfast, which led to 7 years of what I thought was the perfect relationship. Marcus was attentive, ambitious, and unlike my family, he made me feel like I was enough. We graduated together, moved to Phoenix, and built careers side by side. When he proposed on the beach in San Diego, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, I felt like I'd finally won. I had something Jessica couldn't take. Then came the wedding planning, and with it, Jessica's return to my life. She'd graduated by then and was working in pharmaceutical sales, a job that seemed to involve more networking events than actual work. When I called to tell her about my engagement, her response was lukewarm at best. "Well, congratulations, I guess. Is he rich?" "Not, I'm happy for you, or you deserve this." Just calculating whether my happiness was worth her envy. Despite every instinct screaming at me to keep her at arm's length, I asked Jessica to be my maid of honor. My mother insisted it would break her heart otherwise. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Jessica wore white to my bridal shower, gave a speech at the rehearsal dinner that was more about her than me, and spent the reception flirting with every groomsman she could find. But I was determined to rise above it. This was my moment, my happiness, and I wouldn't let old wounds spoil it. The first few years of marriage were everything I'd hoped for. Marcus and I bought a house in the suburbs, climbed the corporate ladder, and talked about starting a family. We decided to wait until we were more financially stable, though I sensed Marcus was hesitant about children for reasons he couldn't articulate. Still, I respected his caution and focused on building our life together. Then, about 18 months ago, something shifted. Marcus started working late more often, his phone was always face down on tables, and he became protective of his passwords. The intimacy between us dwindled until we felt like roommates rather than lovers. "It's just stress from the new promotion," he'd say whenever I tried to address the distance between us. "Once this project wraps up, things will go back to normal." But normal never came. Instead, the gap widened. I found myself checking phone bills, noticing frequent calls to a number I didn't recognize. I smelled unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, something floral and expensive that definitely wasn't mine. Once, I found a long strand of blonde hair on his jacket. Jessica had long blonde hair, but I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Jessica lived across town, and we barely saw her except at family gatherings. As my 31st birthday approached, I hoped it might be a turning point. Marcus had been especially distant, but he promised to make the day special. My parents decided to organize a family dinner at Rosalita's, my favorite Mexican restaurant. I spent extra time getting ready that night, wearing the red dress Marcus had once said made me look stunning. I was determined to reconnect with my husband, to find our way back to each other. The restaurant was perfect, warm lighting, the smell of fresh tortillas, and mariachi music playing softly in the background. Marcus texted that he'd meet me there, claiming a last-minute work call. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my mother immediately commenting that I might want to touch up my lipstick before photos. Typical. Jessica wasn't there yet, which was no surprise. She'd elevated tardiness to an art form, ensuring all eyes would be on her when she made her entrance. As we waited, I checked my phone for messages from Marcus, but found none. Marcus is running late, I explained. Work thing. My father nodded sympathetically, launching into a story about climbing the corporate ladder. Then Jessica arrived, and as always, she made sure everyone noticed. Her laugh echoed through the restaurant as she tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder, wearing a tight black dress that drew appreciative glances from nearby diners. But what made my heart stop was who walked in behind her. Marcus. My Marcus, holding the door for her, his hand briefly touching her back as they navigated between tables. Sorry we're late, Jessica announced, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I ran into Marcus in the parking lot. Lucky coincidence, right? Marcus avoided my eyes as he took the seat beside me, squeezing my shoulder apologetically. Happy birthday, babe. Sorry about the delay. I noticed he smelled freshly showered, his cologne stronger than usual. The dinner proceeded with forced normalcy. My parents dominated conversation, Jessica interjected with stories about her latest sales triumphs, and Marcus remained unusually quiet. I placed my hand on his knee under the table, seeking connection, and he flinched before covering it with his own clammy palm. The gifts came next, generic offerings that felt obligatory rather than thoughtful. Then the waiter brought out my requested chocolate cake instead of traditional birthday cake. As he placed it before me, my father raised his glass for a toast. To my eldest daughter, he began, you've always been so responsible and stable. Stable. Not amazing, not accomplished. Just stable. But before we could sing, Jessica interrupted. Actually, I have an announcement that would be perfect for Sam's birthday celebration. She stood, smoothing her dress over her stomach with deliberate emphasis. I wasn't planning to share this yet, but since we're all together. She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes gleaming with triumph. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt eternal. My mother gasped in delight, my father's face split into a grin, and I felt my world tilting sideways. But Jessica wasn't finished with her performance. Kyle's the father, she announced, her voice ringing with twisted pride. We've been seeing each other for months. We're going to be a family now. That's when I smiled and took another bite of my cake. That's wonderful news, Jessica, I said calmly, setting down my fork. But there's something you should know before we continue this celebration. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document I'd been carrying for weeks. I've actually known about your affair for 3 months. Marcus's head jerked up, his eyes wide with shock. Jessica's triumphant smile faltered. What? Marcus managed to stammer. You really should change your email password more often, Marcus. Using our anniversary date wasn't exactly secure. I kept my voice steady, almost conversational. In March, I borrowed your laptop when mine crashed. A notification popped up, an email from Jessica with the subject line, last night. I couldn't resist. My mother gasped. Elena, this is hardly appropriate dinner conversation. Neither is announcing an affair at your daughter's birthday dinner, Mom. But here we are. I turned back to Marcus and Jessica, who were both staring at me like I'd grown a second head. After I found those emails, I hired a private investigator. Rodriguez and Associates, very thorough. They have photos of you entering Jessica's apartment 23 different times. They have recordings of your phone conversations. They even have the receipt from the jewelry store where you bought her that bracelet she's wearing right now. Jessica instinctively covered the gold bracelet on her wrist, her confidence cracking. You've been spying on us? Marcus's voice rose with indignation. I've been protecting myself, I replied. 2 months ago, I contacted Sandra Mitchell, one of the best divorce attorneys in Phoenix. The paperwork is already prepared. I've documented everything, secured copies of all our financial records, and taken measures to protect my assets. The color drained from Marcus's face. You've been planning to divorce me this whole time? Yes, I was going to serve you next week. Jessica's announcement just moved up my timeline. I turned to my sister, whose triumph had completely evaporated. But there's one more thing that makes your announcement particularly interesting. I slid the medical document across the table. Marcus had a vasectomy 2 years ago. We decided children weren't in our future. Well, he decided. Sacred Heart Medical Center, Dr. Patterson. The procedure was done 28 months ago. I remember because Marcus spent 3 days on the couch watching basketball while I brought him ice packs. Jessica stared at the document, then at Marcus, comprehension slowly dawning. That's not possible, she whispered. You're lying. Check the document, I said calmly. Dr. Patterson's signature is right there. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Jess, I should have told you, but I didn't think it would matter. We were being careful anyway. Careful? Jessica's voice was rising, drawing attention from nearby tables. You let me believe you could be the father when you knew it was impossible? I leaned back in my chair, watching the scene unfold with a satisfaction I'd never felt before. So, Jessica, if you're truly pregnant, and congratulations, by the way, who's the real father? Because it's definitely not Marcus. The restaurant had grown quieter, nearby diners obviously aware that serious drama was unfolding. Jessica's carefully constructed moment of triumph was crumbling in real time. This is a mistake, she insisted weakly. The medical records must be wrong. They're not wrong, Marcus finally admitted, staring at his hands. I should have told you, Jess. I didn't think you'd get pregnant. We were using protection. Protection? I laughed, the sound cutting through the tension. You mean like the protection of honesty? Of marriage vows? That kind of protection. Jessica suddenly stood, grabbing her purse. I need some air, she muttered, practically running toward the exit. Marcus looked torn, glancing between me and Jessica's retreating form. Go ahead, I said coldly. Follow her. You two deserve each other. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus hurried after Jessica, leaving me alone with my parents. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my father cleared his throat. Elena, I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say, Dad. I picked up my fork and took another bite of cake. Except perhaps that Jessica might need to schedule a different kind of appointment, one to figure out who actually fathered her baby. My mother was silently crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. How can you be so calm about this? Because, Mom, this isn't a disaster. A disaster is something unexpected and unavoidable. This was predictable and entirely preventable. Jessica has been taking what's mine since we were children, and you and Dad have been enabling her behavior. The only difference is that this time, I was prepared. Marcus returned alone, his face pale. Where's Jessica? My mother asked. She's in her car. She's processing. He turned to me with pleading eyes. Elena, can we talk privately? There's so much I need to explain. Is it true about the vasectomy? My father asked gruffly. Marcus nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. 2 years ago. Elena and I discussed it, and we decided. You decided, I corrected. You were the one who didn't want children. I was willing to wait. The point is, Marcus continued, it was a decision we made together. I should have told Jessica, but things between us were complicated. Complicated? I laughed without humor. That's one word for betraying your wife with her sister. Before Marcus could respond, Jessica reappeared, her face blotchy from crying but her composure somewhat restored. She slid into her chair without looking at anyone. I'm sorry for running out, she said quietly. I needed a moment to think. And what did you conclude? I asked, genuinely curious. Jessica's eyes filled with fresh tears. There was someone else before Marcus. He's married too. My father groaned, burying his face in his hands. Jessica, for crying out loud. I ended it when things got serious with Marcus, she insisted. But the timing. I guess I miscalculated when I got pregnant. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. The absurdity of the situation finally broke through my carefully maintained composure. So let me get this straight. You were having an affair with one married man, then started sleeping with your sister's husband, got pregnant by the first married man, and tried to pass the baby off as my husband's child. Even Jessica seemed to recognize the horrifying pattern when laid out so plainly. It wasn't like that. I really thought Marcus was the father. Well, he's not, I said definitively. And now you have some difficult decisions to make. Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I think I have some decisions to make too. He turned to Jessica. You told me I was the only one, that it had been months since you'd been with anyone else. Jessica reached for his hand. Marcus, please. I made a mistake, but what we have is real. He pulled his hand away. Is it? Or am I just another thing you took from your sister? The question hung in the air like a blade. Jessica recoiled as if she'd been slapped. I stood up, smoothing down my dress. I think that's enough family bonding for one evening. Marcus, my attorney will contact you next week about the divorce proceedings. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay somewhere else tonight. Elena, please, Marcus said desperately. Can't we at least talk about this? We're way past talking, I replied, surprising myself with the finality in my voice. You made your choice months ago. You just didn't have the courage to tell me. I turned to my parents. Thank you for the birthday dinner. It was certainly memorable. Elena, wait, Jessica called as I gathered my purse. You can't just leave like this. I paused, looking at my sister, really looking at her. Behind the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A deep, gnawing insecurity that had driven her to compete with me our entire lives. I'm not leaving anything, Jessica, I said softly. I'm walking away. There's a difference. I hope you figure out what you're going to do about your baby and its actual father. That's not my problem anymore. As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt strangely light. The betrayal still hurt, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of Jessica's shadow. I had finally stepped into my own light. In the parking lot, I took a deep breath of the desert air. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Please come home. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding and drove to the hotel where I'd already booked a room. Yes, I'd been planning this moment for months, and I'd planned for every contingency. The next morning, I woke up in that hotel room and called my attorney. It's time, I told Sandra when she answered. I want to file the papers today. What followed was the most empowering period of my life. While Marcus sent increasingly desperate messages, and Jessica discovered that her other married lover wanted nothing to do with her pregnancy, I focused on rebuilding my life with surgical precision. I found a beautiful apartment in the Arts District, bought new furniture, and painted the walls colors Marcus would have hated. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion within months. I started therapy to understand the family dynamics that had shaped me. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Marcus, perhaps recognizing the strength of Sandra's case, accepted the division of assets outlined in our prenup. Jessica gave birth to a son she named Diego. DNA testing confirmed what we all knew: Marcus wasn't the father. The real father, a pharmaceutical executive named Robert, eventually left his wife and moved in with Jessica. Whether their relationship would last remained to be seen, but Jessica seemed genuinely committed to motherhood in a way I hadn't expected. My relationship with my sister remains complicated, but it's evolving. After months of therapy, Jessica sent me a letter that surprised me with its self-awareness. She's trying to break the patterns that defined our childhood, and she's asked me to be Diego's godmother. I said yes, surprising myself. Today, 1 year after that birthday dinner, I'm celebrating my 32nd birthday. Not with family drama or hidden betrayals, but with friends who chose to be in my life. People who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. The woman who sat calmly eating cake while her world exploded has become someone who faces challenges head-on, who values herself enough to demand honesty and respect. I learned that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted creates space for what you actually need. Marcus moved to Denver and rarely thinks about the mess he left behind. Jessica is learning to be a mother and a better person. My parents are slowly acknowledging the role their favoritism played in shaping our toxic dynamic. And me, I'm building a life that's entirely mine, surrounded by people who see my worth and reflect it back to me. The betrayal that seemed like an ending was actually a beginning. Painful but necessary, like a bone that must be broken to heal properly. As I blow out the candles on my cake tonight, I'm not wishing for revenge or justice. I'm wishing for continued growth, for authentic relationships, and for the strength to keep choosing myself, even when it's hard. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or calculated cruelty. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let other people's choices define your worth. Sometimes it's walking away from toxicity and building something beautiful in its place. The birthday that was supposed to destroy me became the day I finally set myself free.